Adena Friedman started at Nasdaq as an intern and is now president and chief executive officer, as well as a member of the board of directors. She has more than 20 years of industry leadership and expertise and is credited with significantly shaping Nasdaq's transformation into a leading global exchange and technology solutions company with operations across 6 continents. She also just became one of the only 41 women who serve as CEO of a Fortune 500 company when Nasdaq recently made the list. Adena also serves as a director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, FCLT Global, and Vanderbilt University Board of Trust. So, Adena, let's get into it. Let's start with Nasdaq turned 50 this year and is so much more than a traditional exchange. How would you describe what Nasdaq is today?
Great. Well, Susan, thank you so much for having me here today. It's really a pleasure. Nasdaq today is a global technology company, as you mentioned, serving the capital markets. So we, of course, have our marquee exchanges here in the United States. We also own many of the exchanges in the Nordic countries in Europe. And then we have a scale technology business across market technology, so where we provide the same technology that powers our own markets, we provide that to 130 other markets around the world. We have a scaled anti-financial crime software business for banks, brokers, and exchanges. And then we also have data analytics solutions that serve both our corporate clients in IR and governance, as well as buy-side clients in terms of the workflows that they need to manage their asset management activities and asset owner activities. So today, Nasdaq really tries to take the center. We are in the center of the capital markets as an exchange operator. And we then have developed and really deepened our relationships across the corporate clients, the institutional managers, as well as our broker-dealer clients around the world. So today, we're really proud of the role that we serve in the global capital markets.
Well, it's interesting because as you described, Nasdaq today is really a global technology company. And when you became CEO in 2017, how did you see technology changing the future of capital markets? And how did that influence the direction of Nasdaq?
Well, when I first became CEO, so I just a little bit of background. I had been at Nasdaq since 1993, and I took 3 years away to become the CFO of the Carlyle Group, and then came back to Nasdaq in 2014. So it gave me a chance to step outside the business for a while, understand it from a different perspective, and then come back to the business and understand what are we really good at? What are our clients expecting us to be good at? And where can we deepen our relationships with our clients to help them meet the challenges of the next decade in the capital markets? So we did a strategic review in that context. And at the end of it, we actually ended up divesting of some of the businesses that really we were probably not the right owner of, but then also really investing in new areas where we know that we can be highly successful in serving our clients in anti-financial crime, as well as the data and analytics solutions. And so what we try to focus on is what are the technologies that are going to reshape the capital markets over the next decade? How do we make sure we're positioning ourselves and our clients to face that new technology? The two that we are really focused on is the cloud and machine learning. And I think everyone in the financial services community can understand why those are so important. But our industry manages so much data, and then all of the other data that comes from different corporates in different areas that can serve as fodder, for instance, for investment strategies, but also can help manage the risk and the challenges that the industry faces. It's a wonderful thing to have all that data, but to be able to manage it successfully. The cloud technology is really a foundational component of the next generation of the financial services industry. And then, of course, being able to get intelligence off of that really leans on machine learning. So those are the two areas of technology that we've really leaned in on, and we've positioned our technology to be able to take advantage of those, both in terms of our next generation trade lifecycle technology that serves exchanges, as well as on the anti-fin crime and the data analytics space.
Well, you've had an incredibly successful career, but a wonderful set of experiences at Nasdaq and previously, as you shared. But let's think about this. What's different today with companies, particularly around the subject of diversity, which is a topic that so many are very focused in, and appropriately so. What is different with diversity today, and how did sort of the evolution of what's taking place here play a role in your board diversity proposal?
Well, I think it's we should probably reflect on the fact that when we look at what is the purpose of a company, I think that the Business Roundtable did a nice job of reshaping the notion of what is the purpose of a company. The purpose of a company is, of course, to generate long-term value to shareholders. But in the context of generating that long-term value, we also have to make sure we're serving our employees, our clients, and the communities around us successfully. And if we take that purpose and you broaden that out, you also have to reflect on the fact that what are the communities that we operate in? What is the composition of those communities? What are the demographics that we're serving as clients? What are the demographics of the employee base that we want to have? And as well as how do we make sure that our communities that we operate in are successful and vibrant and sustainable? So in that context of purpose, I think that companies have really come to a better understanding of what that means in terms of driving diversity into their own organizations, both at the board level and at the management and staff level. And that is, I think, a pretty big shift in the focus. Now, my personal opinion is that over the last 27 years of being in the industry, I think we've had a lot more opportunity to shape the financial services industry over the last 27 years. And Susan, you are such a pioneer in being one of the first bank CEOs, women bank CEOs. You can understand the journey we've been on. But what I've really seen is that there's, basically between the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, there was a sea shift in terms of the desire to make sure that the companies really do reflect the demographics of our society. And it went from what I would say the heads of the CEOs saying, well, we need to do this to manage risk, or we need to do this to make sure that we're doing the right thing, to the hearts of the CEOs saying, this is going to be better for us in terms of our role in communities, but it's also better for business. So using the head and the heart to say, how do we make sure we're shaping our companies of the future? I think that the gender change has been pretty dramatic. I realize the numbers aren't where everyone wants them to be. I totally recognize that. But the way that the companies are run, the amount of leadership that is there with women in big roles across the financial services industry has really changed over the last 25 years. Now I think that we have to reflect on the fact that we have a bigger role to play here. We have a role to play in making sure that underrepresented minorities also have just as much opportunity, that there is an inviting place for them to come and be a part of the financial services industry, that they have a chance to be leaders in this industry or leaders in corporate America in general. And so that is, I think, the next really big shift that we have to make as companies to make sure that we are creating an inviting environment, a place of belonging, a place where people can be their full selves, but then also over time that we have to have our companies reflect the communities we operate in. And that starts in many times at the top. So one of the board initiative that we've started is a proposal that's sitting at the SEC right now, is to change the Nasdaq rules for our companies. That if you're listed on Nasdaq, we are going to require that you provide disclosure of your board composition based on self-reported information from each of the directors, but anonymized into a table that provides a demographic understanding of the board members. That then gives investors the information they need to be able to make informed decisions around what their investment strategies are around diversity, and giving them the information they need to make an informed decision there. But then the next step of our proposal is to ask our companies to have at least one women board member and one underrepresented minority or LGBTQ member on their board within the next 4 years. If they are not able to, or they find that that's just not the diversity they want to have, then they would have to explain that they'd have to provide an explanation to investors. And we call it a comply or explain rule. And I think that right now it's gone through its comment period. We've gotten over 200 comments. 85% of those comments have been positive, coming from investors, corporates, advocacy groups, and members of the government. And now the SEC has to deliberate in terms of whether or not they're going to approve the filing.
Well, this is impressive. And as Adena, you and I found out as we got to know one another, we both spent many years, we didn't know each other, but spent many years in Baltimore, Maryland, here in the US. And what a pleasure to sort of track back and see that we've got some intersections. But hearing your support of diversity, and again, the fact that this is also WCD's 20th anniversary year, believe it or not, And we have been advocating for gender diversity, but also very much support the broader definition of diversity, women of color, sexual orientation, and so forth. That's very important to us, and we're going to be covering a number of those topics during the course of the Institute. So let me kind of tie you back to corporate purpose a little bit and think about what we have experienced over the last year and a half and kind of the build up to the pandemic, and then the pandemic, the financial issues and the global issues and so forth. How has that impacted or really influenced your focus, your corporate purpose, your direction, but your focus on diversity?
Well, we've always been a purpose-driven organization to be the center of integrity for the capital markets and to make sure we're creating fair markets and inclusive markets. I think that the whole notion, what was Nasdaq created to do back 50 years ago was to democratize access to the capital markets. So we didn't have to be inside a building in kind of a club-like environment in order to be able to gain access and trade stocks. You could be anywhere. So it was at the beginning of frankly, the beginning of the computer age, or I should at least say the commercial computer age in 1971, when Nasdaq was formed, to make it so that you could be anywhere in the country and you could still have access and equal access to trading and investing in the stocks that were listed on Nasdaq. And that was our whole purpose. Now we say, okay, well, that was a great purpose 50 years ago. So our next generation purpose is to really drive and promote inclusive growth and prosperity around the world through the capital markets. Number one, bringing modern capital market infrastructure to developing nations around the world, making sure that when we look at the anti-financial crime technology, that we are really solving and helping banks and brokers and other exchanges really fight crime in the space so that we have high integrity of the markets and the financial system, as well as providing through our foundation dollars, but also a lot of different assets and capabilities and education to help the broader community be more engaged and involved in the financial system, meaning giving them better access to capital to launch a business, making sure that they understand how to get, whether it's a loan or whether it is equity. It's really just helping everyone in our communities around us and focusing on underrepresented minorities and women to really have access to the financial system, to be an entrepreneur themselves, to have equal opportunity to thrive and to be prosperous. So that is actually kind of our broader purpose today, is really to drive those types of activities, both for our foundation, but also through our core business interests. And it has been, I would say that the last year and a half has had an impact on us in terms of making sure we're focusing our activities in those areas that will really matter here in the United States and around the world.
So is that your purpose initiative?
That is. So I would say that the purpose initiative,
because I've been hearing about this and it's incredible in terms of its global purpose.
So we have our corporate purpose. Now, how do we kind of turn that into what we call a purpose initiative, which is through several things. We have something called the Entrepreneur Center that was, based in California. It still is based in California, but during COVID, we actually turned it all online, so it's now global, which offers free education and mentoring and other services to any entrepreneur who wants to sign up. So it's really making this the ability for you to understand how to launch a business, how to be successful in driving your business forward. We offer a whole range of free education and mentoring services for entrepreneurs around the world. And then secondly, we then also have our foundation, and the foundation really focuses in on underserved communities and driving financial education, as well as access to financing for underrepresented minorities and women, so that we can have more of that inclusive growth mindset here in the United States and elsewhere. And then also then through our core businesses and our Good Works program, our employees can get engaged with that through mentoring, as well as through other community activities that are related to our purpose. And then of course, our broader business. Our broader business is to have integrity in the capital markets and in the broader financial community, because that, we believe, will drive more inclusive prosperity as well.
So Adena, as you think about, WCD has 2,500 members around the world serving on public company or private company boards. What can we do? What should we be doing in terms of our leadership role in boards to help support and help kind of partner with Nasdaq with what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I mean, if we actually just start with thinking about the role of a board member today in companies and thinking about the broader purpose that, if you're sitting on the board of a company, asking those smart questions about what is our broader purpose? How are we serving all of our constituents in the context of serving our shareholders? How do we make sure that we think we're focused on those initiatives to the extent that they're consistent with your business interests, making sure that you are leveraging the power of your platform to serve the communities around you. So that's number one. I think that's just really thinking about how to ask the right questions. The next is one of the things that Nasdaq did was we really transformed our nomination and governance committee into a nomination and ESG committee. So we broadened the mandate of that committee, and they really focus on, we teach them about our foundation, we teach them about the Entrepreneur Center, we talk them through the purpose, the purpose initiative, they approved that, as well as all the other elements of environmental, social, and governance responsibilities that we have that they oversee as well. So we have, I think, a much broader role for the board to play in helping us with this purpose initiative. Now, in terms of how companies can help with Nasdaq's purpose, I think that one of the things to think about is to the extent that you can connect us or connect entrepreneurs into the Entrepreneur Center and just make them aware of that. If some of your clients are young companies and they're looking for funding or they're looking for ways to get better at running their business, we're here to help them. If you think about how you may be able to connect us into organizations that are really focused on financial literacy and education, we're always welcome. We're always happy to hear that. So those are the types of ways that I would love to get the broader corporate director community to be engaged with us.
Well, and I want to sort of also say for those in our audience who are directors at private companies, what areas should their boards prioritize if their companies are preparing for an IPO?
Well, oh gosh, there's so many things. So to make sure that you think about launching successfully into the public markets, I mean, the very first thing, of course, is risk controls, right? So making sure you have the right risk control environment and the systems and processes that really provide for those risk controls so that you march into the public markets in good shape with a well-controlled company. That's just like kind of table stakes, but it's important to say first and foremost. I think then you have to think about the fact that investors today are focused on generating profit with purpose. So as you are thinking through how to tell your story and not only tell the story, but walk the talk, of course, is how do you explain your broader purpose to investors as you're walking into the public markets? Because ESG investment today is an enormous part of the overall investment landscape. There's trillions of dollars being put to work around ESG related strategies. So understanding your own environmental footprint, understanding how you're going to manage that environmental footprint over time, looking at diversity and inclusion within your organization, and what statistics are you going to be willing to share around that going forward, making sure that you think through your social and your social purpose and how do you explain that to investors. Those are all things that if you're prepared for that ahead of your IPO, and then you walk into the IPO pitch and you don't just talk about what you do and how you make money, but how you do it and how you serve communities, you're going to find that you appeal to a broader investor audience. And that will then, of course, accrue to the benefit of your multiple over time. So I would say that's the broader set of questions and ways to think of how the board can be engaged with a company leading up to their IPO.
That's very helpful. And Adena, we're actually going to take some questions shortly. But before we do, I'd love to sort of press a little bit more on this topic of crisis preparedness. And just think about just over this last year and a half, how did you guide NASDAQ and so many that all of your stakeholders through what has been a very difficult period?
Well, I think it's interesting because if you think about there have been, unfortunately, several crisis moments in the New York metropolitan area over the last 20 years. So we can point to, of course, 9/11 being a defining moment in the history of the city and the history of the country. But then also Superstorm Sandy, which was a massive hurricane that came up the eastern seaboard and really took out New York. In both of those cases, the markets had to close because frankly, the locational dependence that not only that our competitor down the street had, but also many of our market participants, they just couldn't operate without having their physical location of New York up and operational, without having their people be able to go into the office. And I think on the back of Superstorm Sandy, it really, really drove the need to have very advanced business continuity planning. So whether it was us or whether it was all of our clients, to be honest with you, we were always operational during those periods of time because we've always been, a technology-driven exchange, and our data centers aren't in the middle of New York City. But the fact of the matter is, we all had to operate. We had to prepare for a world where none of our employees could come to the office, and so business continuity planning became a very serious part of the overall fabric of the financial system. And I think that the 10 years of planning, bringing technology into our organization, testing out our employees' abilities to work from home, manage the markets, market operations, tech operations, development. I mean, all these critical capabilities that we needed to be able to manage from home. We took a long view to how we can make sure that the company was prepared for that. And thank goodness we did, because we had to send all of our employees home over a period of 2 days in the middle of our early March last year. And it was during the middle of a market storm in terms of the level of activity we were experiencing, volatility, it was a very, very, it was a crisis moment for the industry. So to have that and to have all of our employees move to a home environment, I have to say I was extremely impressed with how the financial industry handled it. And I was really proud of our team for being able to do that seamlessly.
Well, and your leadership has been extraordinary, no question about it. And I'd like to actually draw, there are a couple of questions around, just share some of your earlier experiences. What sort of helped you become the incredible leader you are today? Part of it is growing up in Baltimore. I know Baltimore, Maryland well, but talk a little bit about your early life and who inspired and who mentored you.
Well, I was extremely fortunate to have two awesome mentors in my parents, to be honest with you. So, my father worked in the industry his whole career. And so, we would sit at home. And my brother, by the way, has also gone and he's an investor today. My father was an investor. So we would actually talk about what does it mean to be an investor? And not that I really understood market structure. It's not like we sat there and talked about markets, but we did talk about investing in companies. And, I would go to my dad's office when I had days off of school and help out in the office. And just, honestly, that kind of learning through osmosis was really an important part of growing up and understanding that this is an industry that I could be successful in. That I think we have to recognize that if, I think about all of these buildings in New York City, and they're filled with, people working here, but there are so many other people who live in New York City who've never been in one of these office buildings. And so I had these incredible role models growing up that really made it clear that the sky was the limit. Like I shouldn't limit my ambition. And I think that helped a lot.
Well, that's amazing. And we're starting to get some other questions, but let me just, before we get into that, just another thing. So you talked about your role as an intern, your Carlisle experience and so forth. Which position do you think best prepared you for your current position? And then I want to talk about, we actually have a question about the office of the future. So speak to what experience in particular was most memorable in sort of arming you to be the leader that you are today?
Gosh, there's so many. But I would say, I guess actually for 7 years, I was the head of M&A here at Nasdaq. I was head of strategy. And so we did a lot of mergers and acquisitions during that period. But there were two deals that really, I think, made it so that I felt that I could handle anything after that. So one was the acquisition of iNet, which was a trading technology that really defined our future, and we still use it today. And the other was the acquisition of OMX, which are the Nordic exchange operators. And the reason I bring those up is they were both kind of sagas of deals. Like they were not straightforward. They were very complex. Multiple parties were involved. And I led those deals. There was a lot of drama involved, particularly in the OMX deal, in terms of international intrigue associated with some country leaders coming in and trying to upend our deal. So it was a really, really interesting time of developing my leadership, managing across teams, driving to an outcome, not having certainty of that outcome, but just, kind of just plowing through, but also the work ethic involved, the need to be nuanced in my communication, the need to lead, the need to influence across groups, bring people together towards a common purpose. I think all of those skills were learned in doing those deals.
Well, terrific. And we're running out of time, but we do have a question for Lorraine Harriton who is actually with Catalyst. And she's saying, what do you think the office of the future will look like? And where on the spectrum of remote versus in office will it land? And how can we make sure women are advantaged by the change in the nature of work? So that we'll wrap up with that question.
I would love to have that crystal ball, because boy, does every CEO wants the answer to that question. So I can only say, what are we doing here at Nasdaq? Because we did actually start that conversation with our employees yesterday. We do intend, starting in September, to have our employees come back into what we call it the Nasdaq blend, but a hybrid environment, where we are, we want to bring our employees back about, 2 to 3 days a week to have them experience the office, experience their colleagues, have those interactions in between meetings, having the ability to have the innovation and just the inspiration, but also the cultural connection that we get from bringing people together. So we're looking at kind of a half-time, 2 to 3 days, depending on the leader, depending on the needs of the organization, to have them in office. Now, they could always choose to what we call flex up to 5 days. That's totally fine. But we would expect them at least 2 days in a week. And it's not any 2 days. It would be based on how we kind of bring groups in what we call in pods, to make sure that they have interaction with their peers. And then on those other 2 to 3 days a week, they have the flexibility to work from home. We are offering also, we've had something called flex days here at Nasdaq throughout the pandemic, where particularly for caregivers, we've offered them up to 4 days a month where they could actually take time off to manage their families if they had children who were supposed to be in school who were not, or they didn't have caregivers for their children, and 2 days a week or 2 days a month for every other employee, to make sure that they can manage the challenges of working remotely. So we're going to keep some of those flex days, to have six a year, to make it so that they have the chance to manage their lives a little differently. And so we're trying to find that, what we call the Nasdaq blend, the blend of in-office time and the flexibility of at home, so that a working parent can have an easier time thinking through how to manage their lives and manage their work.
Well, your professional experience and personal experiences with your role models, your mother, your father, and others, this is helping you sort of figure out how best to move forward. Thank you so much. We're running out of time, but I am looking forward to staying in touch, and a year from now, looking back and seeing the incredible progress we are going to see in terms of increasing diversity in boardrooms and in companies around the world. So thank you so much, Adena. Take care and be safe.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.